天你们看到我们后世的大学里面还有比较多的。
To speak on this topic, it was a no-brainer because people of color have had, a very strenuous year. And and for the Black community, we've had a very tough last couple of weeks with the George Floyd trial and all of the other shootings that we're seeing across this country. So it's important for me to be on here today because I want to make sure that everyone in our community in the city of Milwaukee and Milwaukee County feels safe, that they have an opportunity to not only just live in their communities and survive, but to thrive. As a person of color, as a Black woman, I know what it feels like to be discriminated against. I know what it feels like, to go into some stores and businesses and just hold your breath because you're waiting, because you know that it's coming. But also as a Black woman and a state legislator, I know too that Milwaukee can be one of the best places to live. And because we're a caring community and we've always survived and we will continue to survive. So it was very important for me to be on here, to be a part of this conversation, because I want people of color to know that Wisconsin is our home too, and we deserve to feel safe. We deserve to be protected. Our voices deserve to be heard. But most importantly, we deserve to know that we have elected officials in this state that care about our issues and our concerns. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here.
We'll ask you more questions, Senator Johnson, but we know that this is not one minority against another minority. This is not one nation against another nationality. It's about how to understand each other's importance and how to learn from each other about how to survive the discriminations and the hatred that some people hold against us. So thank you for your opening speech. We have some time now. We can go to Allison Hayden. She's a lecturer of Jewish history and a research associate in the Milwaukee Jewish community. And we just talked about that Jewish people in the world were always minorities until 1945 in Israel. So they have a long history about how to deal with discriminations, how to survive as a minority, and how to cope with the challenges that constantly haunted them for many, many years. And I'm glad that you can come to us to share Jewish communities as a nationality minority. How did you view the ways that the Jewish community survived the attack and thrived in many ways as a minority nation? Allison.
Thank you for having me. Like you said, I work for the Milwaukee Jewish Federation. I'm the Israel and Jewish Community Relations Council Program Associate. It's a very long name, but it means that one of my specialties is that I unfortunately track and monitor anti-Semitism in Wisconsin and what it means for our Jewish community here. So I'm just going to give a little background about our audit, because as you said, we have been persecuted for a very long time, but even here in America, we have set up a system to help with that. The ADL and a lot of JCRC's, Jewish Community Relations, were set up specifically to deal with anti-Semitism and the effects of being a minority in a country. So I'm just going to kind of talk through what our process is and what are some of the things that we offer to our Jewish community in general. So the JCRC, the Jewish Community Relations Council, has been collecting anti-Semitic incidents in the greater Wisconsin area continually since 2011. And then we released that information in our yearly audit of anti-Semitic incidents of Wisconsin. Over the past 10 years, we have seen a continual upward trend of incidents, with 2020 being the highest on record, with 99 incidents, which was a 36% increase from 2019. The audit this year concerningly shows a significant increase in overt anti-Semitic expressions, especially on social media with the lockdown. And most of it was laden with conspiracy theories and hate group rhetoric. We have seen this just general concerning increase in very open and public expressions of anti-Semitism and hate in general on a level we previously hadn't seen. It seems to our audit that people feel justified to be more open with their hatred. And unfortunately, often when something bad happens, for example, the pandemic and economic crisis, people tend to look for a familiar target to blame. And it's unfortunately easy for people to fall into that idea of, oh, the Jews, yeah, that makes sense that it's their fault. Even if someone isn't anti-Semitic, it's a familiar mindset to fall into since it's been the building blocks of hate rhetoric for centuries. So our audit includes events that occur in the whole state of Wisconsin that are committed by Wisconsin residents, relate to Wisconsin institutions, relate to or specifically respond to Wisconsin persons, or otherwise would go unreported if not reported in our audit. We intake incidents from across the state, but because of our location in Milwaukee, the majority of our audit tends to focus on Southeast Wisconsin and Madison, as those are two epicenters of Jewish life. We strive to be very accurate and consistent in our reporting, and we have several ways that people can report to us. We have either an online contact form that people can submit to us, or they can directly contact myself or our security official, or they can sometimes also contact their Jewish community leaders, be it their rabbis, their directors at organizations, things like that, and they will forward reports onto myself. We try to publish out to the community and reinforce to them that we are a safe place for them to come with concerns, and no concern is too small. We will listen to any, be it seem like a microaggression or a major threat. We want to make sure that they understand that we will listen to anything they have to say and bring to us. Every report is anonymous to everyone except myself and our security office if he need to be brought in. But other than that, no personal information goes beyond what I see. We will not take action on any issue. So if someone reports an incident, we will not reach out to the other party or to the institution unless we have the agreement and acceptance of the person who reported it, because their safety and their comfort and what they want to do is the most important thing. After receiving a report, we investigate, usually it's myself, by gathering additional information, be it screenshots if it's a online social media post, be it calling an institution to talk to coworkers if need be, and generally gather all this information in order to corroborate the incident. We do take incidents as they are reported, and most of them it is, we don't question that it didn't happen, but we do try and look for additional information. If the incident needs additional action by law enforcement, we will connect with them via the approval of the person, the victim. And we're also in connection with a few national organizations such as the FBI, the Secure Community Network, which is the Jewish Federation of North America security organization, and the Anti-Defamation League. Having had consistent data for so many years and being able to supply it to those national organizations every year allows them to also track national trends and multi-state incidents, such as 2 years ago, the hate group The Base vandalized one of our local synagogues, and it ended up becoming an investigation because they were active over several states. So at the end of the year, I compile all of the reports and sort by date and include all of the relevant information, including trends, location, type of interaction, and any keywords that we usually track, things like Hitler, swastikas, Jewish power, things like that. And then the audit is reviewed by our anti-Semitism task force, then our JCRC board, and then finally our JCRC council, which is the community-wide representative. It has about 64 members of the community in it, and they review and make the final decision, analyzing each incident and voting on if it is anti-Semitic or not. We are cautious and conservative about calling something anti-Semitic because we don't want to be seen as overly touchy, but we also understand that it's a very serious issue, and this is only a fraction of incidents, as many go unreported. So it's important that we reflect what we find. We also provide resources to victims of incidents. Specifically, there's two main areas that people request. It is either education-based, which is especially when it's an incident in a school, or counseling and social services to help them process the incident. For education, we have our Hours Against Hate program, which is an initiative especially for schools and workplaces to help stop bigotry and promote respect across lines of culture, religion, race, tradition, class, sexual orientation, and gender. And the other major resource we have for counseling and social services is an advocate at the Jewish Family Service that is specifically for victims of hate crimes or anti-Semitism. One nice thing about Miss West, our advocate, is that she is free to charge whoever would utilize her support, and it's also for any hate crime. So it's not just Jewish specific, it's any community member. She can provide emotional support, access to therapy, safety planning, help with finding a lawyer if it needs to be taken to court for a hate crime, or just general connections to community support networks. And we've only launched her about a year and a half ago in our community, because before they were juggling between several advocates at the family services, but now that she has taken on that role, it's been very beneficial to our community to have one person that we can send people to she'll listen to their story, and then she'll help them work through what they felt from the incident, what actions they want to take. We also encourage people to use the Community Response Network, which is a coalition of Milwaukee-based community organizations who work together to support victims of hate. They specifically have a hotline that we hand out when we're handing out resources that's specifically for people who are victims of hate crimes or hate incidents that need support and an ear to listen. So every year we evaluate these trends so that we can share them with the community as well as these national organizations. These trends and the gathering of them help us get a feel for the state of anti-Semitism and how it's affecting parts of our community, especially in our schools. We then use that information to focus our educational and community work and choose what direction is the best way to fight bigotry and hate and support our students and our community. We must understand, identify, and call out these activities when we see them, and we need to give support to our students and children on that as well. So the JCRC, we work year-round to respond to and prevent these incidents, as well as work with our interfaith and intercultural relations in our ongoing effort to fight bigotry. Education, we found, is a key pillar in fighting bigotry, as you're more likely to hate someone that you don't know. And unfortunately, people are more likely to hold biased opinions about someone they've never met. I personally have given presentations to smaller communities throughout Wisconsin that told me afterwards that they'd never met a Jew. and they didn't know what it meant to be Jewish in nowadays, or what anti-Semitism really was. So they said it was helpful for them, and we live by that idea that working together with other faith, ethnic, and community groups is the perfect way to fight bigotry. The JCRC has been working to create educational opportunity and facilitate thoughtful conversations, because countering polarization brings people together and helps with that. We know as a community and as individuals, we cannot confront anti-Semitism only by calling it out and releasing audits. Often people see that and think that anti-Semitism is extinct, is done, isn't a problem anymore, but it really is just one small part of the greater hatred and bigotry that people hold. And we need to build alliances just like this meeting and give people tools to work together and know each other, because we have to deepen the sense of common cause. Most individuals who espouse hateful ideologies hold those views for multiple racial, ethnic, and religious minorities, as we found, and we cannot fight one form of hatred and bigotry without fighting all of them. And for that, we are stronger together, and that's one of the pillars of what the JCRC tries to do through our audit.
Wonderful, wonderful, Edison. This is the basic concept that we're trying to convey today, that is attack to one is attack to all. So very good presentation, thank you. Now we will give the microphone to Mark Denning, who's representative from American Indian community. And I just recently sold my business to an American Indian tribe. So now I belong to American Indian tribe. So you see, we're all connected. So I'm so glad that Mark, you come over with a short notice to share your experiences and your community's experiences about how to deal with discrimination and hate. You have 5 to 10 minutes, but hopefully less than 10 minutes.
Bueno buju and we magana duk nadawe benezi indigenous cause na me indodem. Anishinaabe and Dao Neopid and Donjaba. That language is a language that 100% of the people that lived in this area spoke at one time. And I always try to honor my mom and my dad, my elders, by speaking that before I say anything else. And what I said was, in a way, to all the things that are, to all the things that have been, and to all the things that are coming, is a greeting. And then I shared my name, which is a bit about the East and birds coming with messages. Also, what I shared was my clan, which is Sturgeon clan. And at the end, I talked about the places where I have descended from, which is, as I sit here, I'm a mix of 6 different tribes, French and English. And I always have listened to my sister when she said, sometimes in this country, people want you to be one thing because you may look a certain way, or you may speak or do a certain thing. And she said, you know what, when somebody wants to put their thumb on their head and define you and your ancestors, just remember, they're asking you, which grandparent do you deny, by limiting your answer to being just one thing. And I'm glad to be here for one. And I think we have a lot of things in common. We both represent communities that are de minimis in number compared to the larger number, meaning that when something happens to us, a lot of times we're invisible to the larger society because our numbers are small. And sometimes because of the mixing of our families or our businesses are in different parts of the city, they don't see us as a group of people, they'll see us as individuals. And so there's behaviors that come towards us that have severe implications for our children. And by our children, I mean all our children. And I'll give you this example. When hate crime is being talked about, I think as moms and dads and people are watching this, we understand that hate crime just isn't under the legal definition. Hate crimes can exist and are done to our children, they're done to us, at different times in our lives that we can remember, or even presently. And what happens is those moments is an interesting thing, right? Especially for our youth. We learn in this country about how education is a way towards liberation and to avail ourselves of leading and becoming and working towards a better life. What's so interesting about that to me is when our kids are in school and hate visits them in the hallways, when things are spoken to them to make them uncomfortable in the schools, when they are diminished in their person and character because of their race, because of their ethnicity, the school becomes an unwelcome place to be. And we forget that outside of that school are forces that want to make our children feel better. There's people who drive around in cars that look for students who are uncomfortable in school and say, I will be your friend. I will help you. And these people have names. They're human traffickers. They're people who will become a boyfriend or a girlfriend to our children. And they'll say, we love you. We want you to be a part of our group. And so they become and use this sense of belonging to a greater thing to entrap our children into areas of human trafficking. That's the kind of thing that doesn't appear in the hate law. And even if I look as a de minimis population, as an American Indian person, if I go to the Federal Bureau of Investigation and look at their opening page about hate crime and what it is about, I'm not going to see the name American Indian. What I'll see is a pie chart, but I'll see a chart of other races, but not us. And that's kind of where we are as an invisible group, is we are vulnerable in this larger sort of thing. And what happens is people don't see those hate crimes as with one victim. There's many victims behind that victim, the mom, the dad, the family that gets targeted, the low self-esteem that children may carry or even deny where they come from. The idea that this low self-esteem can lead to low grade level achievement. This idea that they're uncomfortable in a school, and again, leads them down a path that we've worked so hard so they can provide and have a better way of life. I'm just going to close my comments here because this is about a community that I've become familiar with in personal ways through my relationship with Dr. Adrian Chan. That's known to some folks in all of the community of Milwaukee. And also because of the teachings that I grew up with, the traditional teachings of Indigenous people. Please remember, I can't speak for all Indigenous people. That's not my role here tonight. I am not an expert in all Indigenous people's life ways, but I am an expert in my life. I am an expert in that my mom was one of the founding members of the parent organization of the American Indian Chamber of Commerce, which has a very fruitful and close relationship with other Chamber of Commerces around the state. And Senator Johnson, I'd like to know that my daughter was an intern with another senator and was the only American Indian intern during her time at UW-Madison. You know, so your work I have seen up close, and the work that you've done is very brave work and difficult work. In hosting seminars like this, there may be just 14 of us on this line right now. But believe me when I say this, I'm glad we're being recorded, because we have similar events in the Native community. And after a week goes by, we'll have 500 to 600 viewers looking at the results of what we talk about. And I want to get to those results now. I want to be able to say, from my experience as a Native person, going through the Milwaukee public school system, having a language that's different than others, having a presence that's been diminished, and using our traditional ways, how we can lift each other up. I'll end by saying this. This meeting is about our community, I agree. And in our traditions, as we have practiced them in Milwaukee, last year, we began a thing called Unity Fires. On the north side of Milwaukee, we would have fires burn in our traditions for 4 days, 4 nights. In our very first fire, we invited Asian Pacific community to come in and speak. That was our very first night when we held a press conference. This is when the federal government was talking about the Chinese disease, or watch out, or even people acting out in very negative ways in our community. When we had a chance to be in front of the community and talk about what was happening with Native people, the very first day and night, our sole conversation was about our brothers and sisters that we're going to talk about tonight. So Jessica Bowling gave us a statement, and that went across the airwaves and news waves and radio waves across the state of Wisconsin. And it was a precursor for the things that we're seeing now, unfortunately. So I am looking forward to being a part of this. Thank you for the introduction. I wanted to just shed a smaller light that hate crime is more than what it is in the legal definition. It serves to separate us. It serves to turn our children into individuals that don't function in a society of we. It makes them self-protective, and it makes them close up to other people that could help them grow. This is a serious, this is a dangerous situation, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Very good words, and heavy words. I think that will resonate with us for a long time. Next, I'd like to introduce Chris Gan. He's the president of Wisconsin Chinese Chamber of Commerce. He also came from Malaysia as a Chinese national there, and where Chinese in that country was a minority, and was going through a lot of discriminations and hates itself. So he has a double experiences coming from Malaysia and coming to US as a minority twice. So can you say a few words about this topic? You're okay, good.
Hello, everyone. It's an honor to meet so many different groups of people, from the Jewish group, from Afro-American to the American Chinese, and also definitely the Native Americans. It's always an honor, and as I always say, attack on one is attack on all. United, we stand. So one of the best places that we can show the world is to be united. How do we show that we can be united? So we have to do something that is completely different from no one else have done before. I think one of the best ways to do it is to get together to show different forms of performance. Native Americans have the Native Americans ways of doing. Maybe you can perform some jazz. From a Jewish community, I'm not 100% sure, but you can tell us a story. And from my background, from all diverse different ways, many people ask me, where is Malaysia? I'm sure that many of you guys down there still do not know where Malaysia is. Okay, I'll tell you where Malaysia is. Do you know where Mexico is? Anyone who knows Mexico, raise your hands. Okay, so what you need to do is go to Mexico and start drilling, and drilling all the way across. Then you find a country called Malaysia. Malaysia is not part of China. Okay, we have many different kinds of races, different kinds of culture. So we know how to assimilate, adapt to all many different kinds of situations. One way, the best way to know a different culture is to know the language. Knowing the language, knowing the culture. I can't speak the Native American culture. I'm interested in the Jewish culture. I have many Afro-American friends, and I do love plentiful of Chinese food and all diverse kind of food. Food is always the weapon of peace. And drinks, of course, if you do like to drink. So it's a great opportunity to meet you guys, to come over here. Hopefully we do have a vision for Wisconsin Nights. I came here in 1991. I don't see any difference between all different kinds of colors. What I see is everybody needs to be united. So if you have a minority children, or child is being bullied in the middle school, in the high school, what do? My kid is from West Bend. So he's the only Chinese kid or only Asian kid throughout the whole high school or throughout the whole middle school. So of course, there are people who start to bully. And I asked, they said, Dad, what am I supposed to do? I said, you always need to form alliances. You have your own friends. And when you have a group of alliances, nobody dares to bully you. So you have to form the groups. And there are other kids from other different minority groups. They might be alone and they suffer tremendously too. So it is good to have the leaders of the society maybe to form some such of education system that allows the minorities or certain people who got bullied and to get help. Help is forming from all different various groups what needs to be done and tell the minority there is help and help is on the way. So from the senator point of view, hopefully we can get some funds on this, some hotlines, some diversity programs that will have people to teach about diversity from all different to all different schools in state of Wisconsin. And besides the principals need to attend these diversity programs, the police officers that in the middle school and high school also need to be there. So once the principal knows it, once the police knows it, and from the top, all the students and the teachers will also know it. I think that is one solution for that. Hopefully we do have funds for this in the future. Okay,
Yeah.
that's all.
Thank you. Ask a question. Then if no other questions asked, I'm sure I have quite a lot of questions. I'll perform like a anchorman to ask questions. But we can ask each other questions. I'm sure this is a rare opportunity and a great opportunity. So first of all, as to Allison, most of the Chinese coming to this country came through the last 40 years, because 1979 is when China and US built diplomatic relations. And before that, there were total about 300,000 Chinese in this country because of the cruel and a very discriminative Chinese Exclusion Act that reduced purposely our Chinese presence in this country by a lot. So Chinese was a dominant power for in the 1850s, and then after the Chinese Exclusion Act, Chinese number dropped tremendously down to about in the 1970s, 300, and that included a lot of the new Chinese immigrants from Southeastern Asia after World War II. So there's not that many, but now there's supposedly 5 million possibly Chinese nationals or nationality population in this country, which means about 90% of the Chinese population came as a first generation or second generation. So their knowledge about how to survive as a minority in this country is very primitive. But Jewish people have been minority and have a system to deal with this for a long time. So I'm so impressed about your presentation. How can you help us to build a similar system? Is I think is a major task for you and us. If you can do something, need funding or whatever ways or personnel to support you, we'd love to see the help, because this is whatever you just said is valuable.
Yeah, so like you said, we have been a minority and kicked out of a lot of countries. So I don't want to say we're used to it, but we're used to turning to each other first for support. And for the longest time, Jewish communities were very insular. And it wasn't until we started spreading out, we started assimilating a little bit into some countries, especially when we came to America, that we became outward facing, and we were both accepted and not accepted at the same time. And even to this day, there's a lot of people that tell me, well, you don't look Jewish, so you wouldn't be picked out of a crowd to be discriminated against, so you don't live in a problematic world, like you don't have to deal with that on a constant basis. Well, I mean, I wear my star around. Most people have a pretty good idea that I'm Jewish, and I, you know, people say things to me, but it's like it's, you know, it's a different thing than what you guys have been experienced, because at this point it's just deep seated that we're going to experience this wherever. Whereas, like you said, you're newer to living in this country since the increase. People are still, like, everybody already has their ideas that they assume about us, but it seems because you're still first and second generation, there's a lot of unknowns, and there's a lot of people that I found, communities don't like change. And a lot of the community, especially here in the Midwest, is very like solidly Christian and white. And anything that deviates from that is immediately seen as not a threat, but as something that is other. And so what we found, like you said, building these kind of alliances and really supporting each other, but putting ourselves like with an outward face to try and reach out. Like I said, that Christian group that I talked to said that they'd never met a Jew, and that they were very surprised that I was such a pleasant person to talk to, which I like was shocked that someone would say that to me. But it just it came from an area of not understanding just how bad it is. And I'm sure for you guys as well, you get a lot of comments that seem to the person saying them like a one-off comment, no ill intent, but it obviously feels very personal, or it's very, you know, racist, or it's very, you know, bigoted in its own way. And I mean, as far as our system goes, like I said, we have had many, many years to work on this. And we found the best way is a strong support in our own community. That's why we have the Milwaukee Jewish Federation, is like the major foundation of all Jewish organizations in Milwaukee. And say we're the one-stop shop, but we're the place that any Jew for any reason can go to, and we can find the help that they need. If they need help with housing, we can help them with housing. If they need help with foods, we have a food bank. If they need help finding medical, if they need help with school, if they like, we've built ourselves up this system of support within our own community. And once we had that strong base, we really started to spread out. And that's where we are now, is that we have, you know, our hands out to a lot of different groups. I mean, I think putting some kind of universal like hate crime reporting would be great, because right now, like, yeah, I can tell you statistics about anti-Semitic incidents, but I can't tell you many statistics about anti-Black. I can't tell you about anti-Asian. I can't tell you about anti-Indigenous. Like, I know of some, and oftentimes when I get reports for an incident that's anti-Semitic, sometimes there's also something that's racist in there for someone else. But I don't have anywhere to report that to other than Southern Poverty Law Center or the Anti-Defamation League. We don't have like a system here in Wisconsin other than our system to report it. So what it would look like, I personally couldn't take on like a whole nother role of doing this for all hate crimes, just because it's already a lot that I do in my current job. But perhaps it is something I could train somebody for, that we could help. I could help with how we set up every system. I have reports, I have Excel sheets, I have like documents that track trends. Like, I have a lot of institutional knowledge that I've built up that I would like to share, but it is a little overwhelming to just,
Understand it. Yeah.
you know, throw it out there.
It's a good start for us. So we will ask you for support. Next, anybody has other questions before I raise up another question?
Actually, I would like to make a quick comment to Mark. that when you said not all hate crimes are actually included in the hate crime law, that was the perfect way of putting it. And I've tried to explain that to people, that it's there's so many hateful things and hateful incidents that just don't get acknowledged. They don't get, not publicity, but they don't get attention or the, interaction that they deserve. And some of them just don't fall under what's considered a hate crime. So they kind of go under the radar, which was one of our inspirations for doing our audit, is because a lot of these incidents are things that if we didn't report them, no one would. They wouldn't show up. And I feel many of you would probably have very similar incidents. They're just as valid and as important in understanding the state of things as any hate crime. But, hate crime is such a lofty and very exclusive term that not many things that are hateful incidents fall under a hate crime. So I feel broadening our understanding of what we consider an incident is very important, so that no one is forgotten, no one is missed in their suffering.
Okay, next question. I thank you, Allison. The next question will be for Senator Johnson. Many incidences against Chinese were conducted by some peculiar group of people, but a lot of them are blacks. Can you tell us how to understand that? Why particularly minorities are against minorities in this past so many instances in the Asian hate movement? Or I can't call it movement, incidences.
The reality is that we don't have statistics to say that the majority of hate crimes against Asians are coming from African Americans. I know that we did see one on television that was highly publicized. And when I saw that, me and a friend, we were sitting together and we were both shocked. And the reason that we were shocked is because African Americans know what it's like to be discriminated against. And we know what that feels like. And so to put those feelings off on another race of people, to me was just, I didn't understand it. And so immediately we felt that that was a one-off situation, that the individual must have had mental health disabilities. And it was true. I think that they said that the individual has spent 19 years in prison for murdering his mother. So if he murdered his mama, nobody else has anything coming. And because we don't have any statistics saying that, but, African Americans, we endure a lot of discrimination. We can see that from, the police violence that we've seen on television these last couple of days involving unarmed individuals. So, we get it. And, I think that was the reason that, I agreed to do this tonight, because I didn't want Asian Americans to feel like, African Americans are unsympathetic to what's happening to them, because that's not the case at all. We definitely stand with our Asian brothers and sisters, and we want to make sure that Milwaukee and the rest of the state is a safe place for them. And, so we're standing up against hate, not only for ourselves, but also with you, as we are with other nationalities too, because if you're a person of color, you know what it feels like to be discriminated against. And I think that that's something that, I can speak to strongly, because as one of only 3 members in the state Senate that's a person of color, I understand that the state legislature helps to set the tone around the rest of the state. And so we're doing everything that we can to try and make sure that people of color feel safe in their own communities as well as the rest of the state.
Can we, Senator Johnson, can we suggest that you come up with some kind of legislation and initiative to show that, like what Chris just said, that this state not been having a lot of minorities issues before, and now it's kind of a fairly new issue to the state, pass a law to put a certain budget, even symbolically, to educate the educators, the law enforcement, and the legislators themselves to understand how to deal with minority discriminations and hate crimes, so that we have a general knowledge and we have a budget for that, to do it. Would that be that? I'm sure you are very busy, but this country, any true reform has to go through a legislation process. There has to be a law, has to have money. Without the money, without law, we can strike on the, we can do demonstrations on the street. It doesn't do much afterwards, right?
Okay, so as far as the state goes, we have hate crimes that are on the book. And, you know, like Mark said, it doesn't apply to every single situation, but one of the state statutes, which is 939.645, a hate crime penalty enhancer can apply when certain crimes are committed, at least in part based on the belief or perception regarding race, religion, color, disability, sexual orientation, national origin, or ancestry of the victim. Now, there are specific penalty enhancers there. So in terms of being able to legislate away hate, no law is going to be able to do that. You know, but what we can do is encourage the is to encourage that those penalty enhancers, when hate crimes come about, that, you know, they are used and that they are enforced. And that's one of the things that we can try and make sure that we do, is make sure that individuals are being held accountable for the hate crimes that they commit. Now, I was a co-sponsor of AB 126, which was to create an Office of Equity and Inclusion to improve diversity in state government. And that's going to be across all nationalities. We felt that that was important in state government because we wanted to create a state council of equity and inclusion to create and kind of like oversee the implementation of state equity and inclusion plans to make sure that we are addressing the issues that need to be addressed for people of color, to make sure that it's a safe place and a comfortable place for people to live in Wisconsin, because we know that, you know, based on what part of Wisconsin has 72 counties, and based on what county you live in, that can kind of dictate what the minority population is. And so some counties, you know, they've never seen a Black person, not up close. So, you know, that's always interesting when you go around parts of the state and you can just feel on the side of your face that people are staring at you and, you know, they're looking at you crazy, and you turn around and you say hi, and sometimes they don't speak back, but that's okay. But, you know, just trying to get people to understand that, you know, like Allison said, for people who haven't had the experience or the opportunity to talk to people outside of their community who might look like us, an opportunity to do so. Now, that doesn't give them a pass to just, you know, be disrespectful and careless, but sometimes they don't understand. For example, one of my colleagues in the state legislature said, you know, I just don't see color. You know, I don't distinguish that. But if you're saying you don't see color, you're saying you don't see me. And, he didn't understand that. And so just trying to take the opportunity to educate as much as possible. But I highly doubt that the state is going to set aside money for education that would be statewide for, something as similar to this. And then even if they did, what would that look like in a community that doesn't have, members of color in that community? What will they teach? But I also signed on to a resolution with Representative Francesca Hong. She's the first Asian American state legislature, and she just got elected this past session. And what that was, it was a resolution recognizing May as Asian Pacific Islander Desi American Heritage Month. And I had to make sure that I read my paper so I could get all that in there. But that's another way to try and educate the state legislature. I will say this briefly, that, the last 4 years were just horrible for people of color overall. But it was extremely, extremely unfair to, our Asian American brothers and sisters. You know, for people of color all across the board, we could see rises in aggression, especially, the way people spoke just openly about race and the type of hostility they had while doing that. But the other thing that it did for us in Wisconsin, it helped us to elect so many more people of color, such as Francesca Hahn, such as Samba Balde, the first Gambian American to ever be elected to the state legislature. We have more people of color in the state legislature now than we've ever had before. And even on the Republican side, there's an African American senator that was elected there. His name is Julius Bradley, and there was another, I believe, Hispanic representative elected on the Republican side. So we're making gains. So even though it feels like, the world is closing in on us right now because of some of the hate that we're experiencing, Wisconsin is still making gains because it's putting people in numbers like never before in the state legislature, and that's starting to look more like the populations that we represent.
Thank you. This is a well good information to learn, and we still look at you to pass more legislations to support us and help us. I think time is almost running out. I'd like to give Mark the last remarks about how to cope with hate and discriminations, and what are the methodologies we can share to each other. Mark.
I'd like to say with the last few moments that we have together, and certainly I don't mean to advise a population or a group of people of answers that they already have. It's just, we might not have spoken them yet. And when you hear it, you'll know, yes, that makes sense. And I would say two major things on this. One is to understand and to ask ourselves a question: is something cultural going on? And I would reference this also to the senator and everybody that's watching. I used to work as a consultant to the Boeing Corporation, to our United States intelligence agencies. And we would often talk about cultural differences in communication. And so oftentimes that American style of communication is so radically different than other cultures, those other cultures are usually squeezed out of a conversation. So when we have meetings together, very oftentimes if we have two different sorts of culture in the room or world understandings, we're speaking past each other, or one culture dominates the conversation in the room, or the other culture doesn't say, this is what we're going to talk about, and the other culture prepares for that conversation, and the conversation goes entirely to a different place. And the people attending aren't prepared for that conversation. And what's in their culture that you've come to have this specific conversation. In this conversation that we're having, we've heard a couple things. One is that when it comes to marginalized populations, I'm talking about women, I'm talking about the community I belong to and serve, Native Americans, the communities that you serve, Latino population, African American, that when it comes to living in this country, their word oppression and oppressor does matter. And we need to know how and why that system works. What this tells us then is that when it comes to even people within our own culture, because of oppression, we have learned from the oppressor how to oppress. We have learned negative ways of being from another culture that looks at us and says, at least I'm not that. Or to create a hierarchical system where one is on top of another and a person can say, at least I'm not that. And then you have these behaviors that trickle down because someone has learned to hate from someone that hates us. And it's a lesson that they have learned over year upon year upon year, the drip, drip, drip of racism. It's so much to the fact that when people, even we approach to have conversations about race, they'll say, oh, you're playing the race card. And to that, what I say to America is I hold up one of these, which we all understand what this is. On all of these is the face of a white person. We work for these every day. We work for these in different denominations, but they're all of the face of one kind of people. So when we hear things like, you know what, I don't see color. We see color every day in the things that we find important or unimportant. And we need to find moments to understand that. We need to find moments where we can hear and listen to each other with the cultural hearing aids that we can get from trusted insiders. Tonight, you have a beautiful and amazing speaker in Senator Johnson, who has given you quotes and words to use at meetings with African-American colleagues who share in the struggle of righteous recognition and justice. You can say, you may not know me, but you have voted for Senator Johnson, and she has been clear on this subject. And here's a quote from her. You could even open a meeting up with that quote that she, of course, approves of and says, yes, that is what I am about and what we are about. Because I will tell you, when Senator Johnson goes to the floor of the Wisconsin State Senate, she is surrounded by a sea of white men who have never lived her experience, who don't have time for this kind of conversation, and shut down law after law after law. What we must work for is a just and righteous law that can be passed. And we can't all put it on her or other senators. To me, answers in this exist. I'll use this as an example. A few years ago, we had a spate of Native American young people committing suicide, something that was going around in our community. And one of the young people got up at the funeral in front of his sister and said this: around every one of our suicides should be crime scene tape, because this suicide didn't happen by itself. It happened because of oppression. It happened because someone didn't want this girl to feel good about who she was. It happened because they wouldn't have her succeed in the classroom. It happened because they weren't listening when she was doing things that would self-harm her. She was going with people that weren't healthy for her because school was not a healthy place. We must look to the halls of education. It is not just a law. It's also, we have a new superintendent of schools who should be approached and say, How can we put this into the curriculum of what young students learn? That's the longer game. But this isn't a game. This is life and death. This is whether a business succeeds or doesn't, just because when you walk in the door, someone accepts you or not as a full partner in the mission of what needs to be done. This is quite serious stuff. I would end my particular part by saying this: we must educate about each other's cultures and our ways of being. Then and only then can we understand. That means that the culture I represent doesn't walk into a senator's office or into a business meeting, and I'm hearing one thing through my cultural ears and seeing in my cultural eyes, but I'm missing the message that that person is giving me. And that person is also not hearing what I have to say or to offer. And it's not because we don't want to understand each other. It's just because we understand differently. It's because we speak differently. It's because where we put things in a sentence, how we put things into words, how we prepare for our meetings and what we do, all of those things are different. But if we don't have an understanding of each other, those moments for understanding are lost. And so often for cultures like the one that I share with my parents and my ancestors, the ones that I've become familiar with in my work with the Boeing Corporation, United States intelligence agencies, is our culture of AAPI and AI, American Indians, is one of humility, is one where we usually let other people speak first so we can understand them. We try to get what's going on. While Americans are shooting from the cuff, they favor the person who looks bright and shiny. What is the saying? One colleague once told me, it was something like about the noisy vessel, and that the noisiest vessel is often empty. And so we get to this meeting, and that is a cultural look at what's happening in the meeting. So when I hear that, please understand in a very basic thing of what I'm saying, and I'm in danger of becoming that empty vessel right now by speaking so much, is that that person who's speaking so much thinks I'm commanding the floor, I'm in charge of the room, I'm saying all these wonderful things. And the colleagues who come from another culture across the table are thinking, that guy, Mark Denning, that guy's an idiot. Where's his homework? Where's his pages? How come he can't say it succinctly and then allow time for other people to speak? Well, I'm thinking I'm doing a great job. I spoke for 49 minutes of a 50-minute meeting. How special am I? While all of the other people go unserved and walk away from the meeting saying, well, there was 5 minutes when he made sense, so we're going to stick with that. We don't know how to call him on it. We don't know how to. I hope I'm making sense to what I'm saying. We need to educate ourselves. We need to educate the other communities. And we need to have folks like Senator Johnson, like Alicia here. These are our trusted insiders to get into a world that we have no admittance to. The halls of power, the halls of the law, and the halls of understanding. We must use our trusted insider friends to the best of our ability to help our communities, because so often we don't know how to help ourselves. But our kids are being affected, our parents are affected, and our elders are being abused. And often we say nothing because we are brave, we want to get along, and to say nothing sometimes is the easiest course of action when the tsunami of hate that is affecting all of our communities must be addressed. It must be addressed by a government that started it, beginning at the very top with the China virus, right down to the least public servant that cleans our streets and says, I will help. Thank you.
Thank you. Well said. I'm gonna stop recording.